But I think we might have been live already.
Oh, it says meetings. Oh, now we're streaming live.
No.
Oh, that was painless, seeing as how I did nothing but sit here.
Well, unfortunately, I have to go back to my Zoom page now.
Okay.
So we are, I'm sure, streaming live. Everybody hold on. You know that this gets a little tricky. Okay, there. Now, let me just make sure we are live. I think we're live, but everybody, I'm looking for a screen. So okay. You know that the first 30 seconds of these is always a cluster.
It's probably the most interesting part.
Yeah, okay. We are live. Now I got to get back to my Zoom page.
Ta-da.
I know. Hey, everybody. Susie Elizabeth Phillips, and I am here with author Meg Tilly and movie star Meg Tilly. After all these years, I finally have a movie star friend. I don't really like her that much, but I just want a movie star friend. Hey, Meg.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. What are you drinking?
I'm drinking peppermint tea and just nothing, just flat. I know. No, it would be interesting if I said, oh, it looks like peppermint tea, but it's really brandy, but it's peppermint tea.
Peppermint tea. Well, I am like you, a dedicated tea drinker. I don't drink coffee. No, but I have to have either Irish breakfast or English breakfast. I'm a purist. Take it black, but I can't handle any other time. But apparently you can. You drink all kinds of teas.
Well, yeah, I was just drinking on the book that manuscript I was working on. I was just drinking my afternoon blend, which is kind of like it's a pretty good tea. But then somebody said, well, tell us what you're drinking. So I did. And I'm like, oh, it's kind of boring. Oh, I'm drinking afternoon blend again. Because usually I do a tea throughout a book.
Yeah.
One day I switched it up and I still wrote really well. And I'm like, oh, I can drink anything I like. So
you wild and crazy thing.
I know.
So you, a lot of authors will have a piece of music they listen to when they're only writing. So with you, it is generally one flavor of tea.
It used to be, but it isn't anymore. And I don't do music. My husband does music all the time in the background, just kind of. But to me, I think I have right now, because I can hear sometimes my husband bumping around, and then I'm like, oh, what's he doing? Oh, maybe I'll go make a snack. Oh, well. So I put on white noise. So it can't be the same white noise for sleep. So I have white noise of water, a fan, and a cat purring. And I don't know why, but the purr of the cat and it just sort of blocks out, oh, what's he doing? So
now your husband is a YA writer, isn't he?
Yes.
Do I get that right?
Yes.
Is that how you guys met? Because you were writing YA for quite a while, even though when you got into it, apparently you didn't know what YA meant.
No, I didn't know. I didn't know why. I didn't know. I was like, what's yeah? But, and then they explained to me, yes, we didn't meet writing that. I had only one I'd written is my first book, Singing Songs. And this was a period where I was going to a lot of writing workshops and retreats and things like that. And I met him at a writing retreat. It was a 5-day intensive where you just write all day and then read and write and read. And we all wrote about really personal stuff because it was personal story. And I had been away from my writing group because we had moved. So I hadn't seen anybody for around 6 months, and I had all this that had to come out. So I wrote about the worst parts of me, and he fell in love. And I was like, oh, well, so it's kind of been a blessing. We're closing in on 20 years, but I told the worst things about me that possibly I couldn't even tell, like family. And I had nowhere to go but up. We were all just writing, and I guess he was impressed with my bravery, or I don't know, meant to be, whatever. But yeah, it's been really
cool. So,
been really good.
Looking at your career, man, you are all over the place, girlfriend. You are a Academy Award nominee, a Golden Globe. By the way, I mean, I have totally been cyber stalking you. A Golden Globe winner in your $29 dress. I heard that.
Yeah. Oh, yep.
And you started, was your first book more memoir or more YA?
It was 100% memoir. Singing
You
songs.
had a really disturbing childhood.
Yes, I did. But there were wonderful things as well. I mean, it's like everything's a mix. So yeah, it was very challenging. And I think I only shared the wonderful parts with the public. I was really famous at the time I started writing it. And I started writing, it was a period I was with Colin, and he was in London doing a play. And so it became my conversation at night. And it was kind of, my children got to the age that I was when my mom married my stepfather, and our life changed radically. And when my children were my age, all of a sudden I saw it differently. Before I just, I just kept playing the happy tape that I played myself, but then when my children got that age, I thought, how is it possible? How is it possible that this was allowed to occur? And as a mother, it was really a challenging time, and I needed to write down the memories because they were so, they were sitting heavy in my heart. And I needed to whisper them in the ground. I didn't know I was going to be a writer. I didn't think I was a writer, and I certainly didn't think it would ever be published, or it never crossed my mind.
I'm passing on the whole issue of the fact that you mentioned Colin. I'm not even going to go there, but so the thing, do you find now? I can speak with great authority because 50 years ago, I had a degree in acting and directing, which I completely abandoned. So obviously I'm an authority on this subject.
Right.
Do you think, well, I have this theory that theater training, acting training is a much better playground for writers really than like those degrees in English literature.
Yeah, I agree with you. And when I heard, because I've been cyber stalking you as well, I can't remember what the interview was, but when they said, well, you used to have you had an acting background, I thought that totally makes sense. Because when I read this book, Can't Stay With Me, which I bought actually an ebook, and it was so beautiful that I had to go out, I had to order it from our local bookstore, because it's really, really a beautiful book. And the thing I loved about it was that you dove into each person, like every single person, you dove into the skin of them. And you got their understanding and the way they see the world. And I thought, I bet you were a very, very, very good actress. I mean, you might not have gone off and done whatever, but I bet you were really good, because you cannot write the way you do and rip your heart out like you did with this book, where I was bawling my eyes out. If anybody out there hasn't read it, I was bawling my eyes out. And what I loved about this was that you talked about, like, it was two different things. It was Tess Hartzong. Is that her thing, Hartzong?
Right, Hartzong.
Yeah, she, who was one way, and then you had the town that she went in, who had a different sort of, perhaps, way of looking at life or political leanings. And it was, the clashing in the beginning, but then it was how they came together and were able to hold up and embrace them all because of and in spite of the differences, and how in that both sides got lives were better. And how you dived into Ian North and his painting and his, like, it reminded me of Banksy, the Banksy paintings that go along. Yep. But also not just the paint, but the reasons why. I knew you were really good. I knew you were an excellent actor, and I could see how, and I was like, yeah, you see. Well, anyway, so that's what I'm saying. Yes, I think doing all those sensory exercises and diving in and creating the story, so you have a scene and you come out, but before you come out through the door, you have to have where they're coming from, what the weather's like, how they feel in their skin, what they had for breakfast. And it's just a natural progression to writing. I mean, it really is.
And thank you very much. That was lovely. But what I'm thinking about is you progress from YA novels, and I want to talk about your it's not new, but your Solace Island series, especially Cliff's Edge, because in Cliff's Edge you have a heroine who's passionate about art.
Yeah.
And, we were kind of talking about that in email a little bit. I loved that book. With Cliff's Edge, I just absolutely tore through it. this, and I can't wait to go back and read the other 2 books in the Solace Island series. You were attracted to romantic suspense. I know that you are absolutely a crazy fan of Jane Ann Krentz. And had you always read romantic suspense when you were doing your YA? Was this something that was always on your mind, or how did that happen?
Okay, so I've been reading Jane Ann Krentz since my kids were little. I think I started reading it, I think when I had my youngest daughter, maybe the second, around the time of the Oscars, or maybe a little bit before, I can't remember. But I found her, I was going on location somewhere, and I needed something to read, and I just saw it. And it possibly could have been Mistress. You think I remember which one, but I've read all of her books, her Jane Ann Krentz, her Jane Castle, her Amanda Quick. And so this was Amanda Quick one. And it was just, I think it might've been that because it had the carriage and the white cover. And you pick it up, and that first chapter, you read it, and you're just hooked. And it was something that I was so scared, being a mom in a challenging relationship, children that you're responsible for, hoping they're going to have a happy life. And there was just something about, it's got the suspense, but it's got the humor, and it's got the strong sense of family, and she has throughout. And I think the biggest thrill of my life, because I've been reading hers, and of course during quarantine, I read her new ones, but I reread the old favorites as well, because it makes you feel safe. Mm-hmm. The biggest thrill was when the first thrill was I'd gone to see George Sanders, what was that, Lincoln on the Bardo, with my husband. He was doing a reading in town. And so I went with him, and we went with some other people. And when I came back from that, and it was a wonderful reading, and he talked very intelligently, and it was very literary, and, and the seats were very hard. And but it was wonderful. It was really wonderful. But we came back, and my husband was glowing, because he's one of my husband's favorite writers, and he reads everything that he's ever written. And I come back, and I get on my computer.
I know what you're going to say. Go ahead.
I got on my computer, and there's a message from Sissy Hartley, who runs Writer Space.
Right.
And she said, now you think I'd have it memorized, but something to the effect of, I snuck your book to Solace Island, to Jane Ann Krentz. She read it, she loved it, and and here's her blurb. And I was like, what? Because Jane Ann Krentz, okay, let me give you background. When I first got together with my husband almost 20 years ago, I thought, no more secrets, because I was a closet romance reader, right? I would read romance, but I would read it in such a way, like, that people wouldn't know that's what I was doing. So much so, because the covers were all like, ripped bodices and things. But so I'd read it, where people wouldn't see the cover, but I read voraciously. Like, I've kept the romance community, like flourishing.
Right.
So I thought, I'm gonna, no secrets. So I said, I've got a really good, because he's, giving me books. So I gave him a couple of Jane's books. But, he wasn't a romance reader, but he knew who Jane Ann Krentz was. So when I told him, she blurred, I was staggering around. I was like, Jane Ann Krentz, I was hyperventilating. She's read my book. Oh my God, she loved my books. She knows who I am. I've met famous people. I've met royalty. I've met like people that everybody else is like, nah, not even a candle to meeting Jane Ann Krentz. Oh I have God. Like right over there where you can't see, but I have hundreds of her books.
I hope she's not watching this. She is going to be insufferable. And of course,
but no, you know what the thing is that sometimes when you meet people you really admire, you don't want to meet them. Like I was scared to meet her in person because it ruins it for you. She is even nicer than you would think. She is such a dear sweetheart.
Yeah.
Like she is amazing. She is so like her heroines, which is why I love her books. It's her.
They're her. Yeah. The logical, rational thinking, honorable. Yep. And that's how I met you. Yeah. I met you through Jane. And one thing I will tell everyone is when you meet Meg, what you see is what you get. She has such good, positive energy. And it's just there. So I was immediately attracted to you, despite the fact that you have all this fame, which, all right. So when I was cyber stalking you, I watched a lot of clips on YouTube and of your films. And the first one I watched was, of course, The Big Chill. And here is what got me about that. Your performance as Chloe, and you were really young then. And by the way, we're going to be talking about Meg's YouTube channel, where she gives you the inside scoop on all kinds of great stuff about The Big Chill, about Agnes of God, about people she's worked with that she loves, and a few people she wasn't as fond of. But we'll talk about that in a minute. Anyway, so I started looking at the clips of The Big Chill. And you were a newbie, and you were overshadowed on the marquee by those huge names, right? You had Glenn Close in there and William Hurt and all that. That performance of yours has got to be one of the most overlooked performances. That is the most subtle, nuanced performance. And I was saying this behind your back. That moment when you pull out the suit and you're in profile and you just see those eyes well up with tears. I mean, I am so over actors with these big, huge performances. What really appeals to me now is that subtlety. And you had it as a very young actor. How'd you get that? Stupid question.
Well, okay, so I think the thing is that my whole life was really acting, because, you know, social workers are showing up. You have to, you know, act. The being in challenging situations, you act your way out of them, you know. So I guess that's why, like now, like you said, what you see is what you get. I'm not acting anymore. You know, I stopped years ago, and it's been such a relief. So I wish I could take credit for the Big Chill performance, but really I would say it was Larry Kasdan gave us a space to be able to find those subtleties, because we rehearsed for 4 weeks before we shot, which on a film is unheard of. You're lucky if you get a week. The only 2 films that had that kind of rehearsal space was this one, and when I was supposed to do Amadeus, and we had a 7-week rehearsal in Czechoslovakia, and but then I didn't get to finish the film. But
you were injured.
In doing that, you get the time. Like, you can work as much as you can. The minute I say yes to a project, I start working on it and finding the layers and developing the layers. But we had a whole month, and Bill was very kind to me. He was the big star at that time. Some of the others had done a lot. It was Glenn's, I think, second film. So she was on the rise because she'd done The World According to Garp. But Bill was really the one who I think got the financing for it. And
oh, wait a minute. Don't tell them the William Hurt story, because
I won't. I
go to Meg's YouTube
channel. Meg's LVP time.
Yeah.
You have a YouTube channel too.
I started. Yeah, I got 100 followers or subscribers on my YouTube channel. You got
Well, it takes a while.
Well, I'm guaranteeing after this, you're going to have more than 700. You've got to go to that channel and hear the story about how Miss Meg couldn't get into the studio and was. Anyway, that's the Big Chill story. But so I also looked at clips from Psycho, which you were amazing, but that's such a creepy movie. And you are such a non-creepy person. But then I switched over and I was watching, I'd forgotten about, Agnes of God, I'd seen it so long ago. Again, it's a quiet, nuanced, but you've got the world in your face, and you're taking all those skills and moving them over into writing.
Yeah. Well, it's fun. It's really, the thing I love about the writing is you don't have to wait for permission to get to dive into characters. So you can just play, and people will either read it or they won't. And that's everybody's prerogative. But you get to dive into all these different things, and stories come up, and you're in charge. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
Well, sort of. I say you're in charge, but I try to block out. I've tried several times, but it never works for me. So they kind of take over and start showing me things. And I think, as with each character you play in, whether it's acting or writing, you find or discover something about yourself and grow. And my characters like Chloe and like Agnes and the different ones that really resonated, they become a part of you, like a friend that you don't see, but is there, so that you think, like sometimes one might teach you a little bit about a certain type of sense of humor, and then something will happen and you'll be like, oh, she would really like that. Or, for a long time after Agnes, it was hard to shake her. And I would have to, I would find myself, if I did something or thought a bad thought or something, I'd creep into the walk-in closet in our rental that we had, and, so that my husband at the time wouldn't see me, and I'd shut the door and I'd like prostate. I was like, it was hard to let go of her, because some of them, when you go in deep, even though I was always me, like I had a little child that I was, but it took a little while to get out of that, trying to be so, trying.
By the way, Assistant Sharon is monitoring if any of you have any questions. And I think Sharon's also going to be posting the link to Meg's YouTube channel. One of the things I have got a feeling that you have to love about writing, I mean, nobody could perform the way you do without loving acting. But one of the things I'm guessing you love about writing is you do have almost total control over the product you submit. Yes, there'll be revisions, but you've got control over most of what's between those covers. And you don't with film, right?
No, you don't. I had one project where I loved her, and I did her for no money, and it was the only project that I did nudity. But I felt strongly about her. It was paganism versus Christianity, and it was that whole struggle, and it was like a puzzle piece, and it was based on an author, but I'm not going to say it because I don't want people to watch the film, because when I saw the director's cut, I was so proud, and I thought, I think this might be the best work I've ever done. Even though it was, my first class dressing room that they promised was sometimes changing, getting clothes out of the trunk of a car and crouching down in downtown London and changing my clothes in the back seat, and some of the production values weren't so, but I felt like I really had discovered something about my own self. It was a very freeing person to step into this kind of she was Aphrodite in modern form. Then I went to the opening and I brought Colin. It was a new relationship, and I was so proud because it was such a tender new relationship, and we were shooting Valmont, but they were having this thing, and the crown prince was there, and I was sitting next to him and his wife, and it was all. And they start rolling, and they've cut an hour out of the film, but because English wasn't the first language, they cut scenes in half. They're like, oh, this scene is too long. So they cut the scene in half. So the reason for the scene, the puzzle piece, is gone. So it didn't make sense. They just cut all the crying scenes and all the nudity, but all the nuances were gone. And I was shaking. I felt so violated. And I thought about quitting acting because I felt like I had let my character down. Like I had taken this for no money at a time when I was incredibly famous, because I wanted to say this, and it felt like she felt violated, and I felt like I had somehow unbeknownst had participated in that, because I didn't have. And I wish I had the long version, which, well, yes, it was long, but it was so much, all those pieces were apart. Like when I did a film, I'd memorize all the pieces, I memorized the whole script so that I'd know where the puzzle pieces come in. So Peggy used to always say, don't give everything at once. It's like a window with a curtain. And just every once in a while, the curtain blows aside and you get a glimpse, and then it's gone. So really, a lot of what you do with this, or sometimes with your thing, is it's all the cover up. And every once in a while, somebody in your book or somebody, you might be saying something different, but the reader or the viewer says, wait a minute, and pieces it together. And that's that's what I love about the writing and the acting.
This is actually a good reminder for me, because I know that as a writer, you can get thrown off if you don't get, the advertising budget you think you want, or the cover you think you want, or the back cover copy you think you want. Those are little things compared to what you're describing. And
well, yeah, I think the thing is that, for the people who are watching because of me, you guys, Susan Elizabeth Phillips is a huge, huge author, and you have to check out her books. And you can start with this one. But yes, so those things when you're starting out, authors, I've only had 10 books published, but you don't, those things aren't like, huh. But for me, I think I've learned, because you can give everything to a part or everything to a book, and people might not go to the movies to see it, or people might not pick up your book and read it, So I have to know that at my point as an author, because I'm writing because it fills my heart, because I want to, because I'm writing the kind of stories that would delight me, that I would read and be like, oh, what's going to happen? But knowing that it's going to happy ever after. So knowing, even though there's bad guys stalking around, that it's going to turn out okay. And so that's what I attempt to do.
And when I was reading Cliff's Edge, I knew you were going to give it a good ending, but I'm telling you, there were a couple places where I was like, oh, what is going to happen next? By the way, I've said wonderful things about you, but you are the world's worst self-promoter.
I'm trying. I'm a little bit better, but the thing is,
you're not.
I guess I feel like I can't force people to pick up my books and read them. It's only if somebody wants to, and then they do, and if they like them, then they'll pick up the next one and the next one,
Full disclosure here. You see those books behind her head from the series? Those are there because I shamed her and I said, what? This wonderful series, these fabulous books. Okay, it's kind of shameful, but the thing is, I think with writing, I want readers to discover your books. I want romance readers to discover your books, because we have the 3 romantic suspense, and the next one is not coming out until next summer. Is that right?
Yes, and it's called The Runaway Heiress. Hey, I put the title in.
What did you say?
I said it's called The Runaway Heiress. And actually, the title came, I was talking with you and Christina Dodd and Jane Ann Krentz, and we batted some things. And then I remember I said, well, you said, well, what's it about? And I said, well, in Hidden Cove, everybody's like, what happened to Mary? So then Jane's like, well, what about what happened to Mary? And I'm like, ooh, that's good. And then Christina Dodd said, what about the heiress? Because I told a bit about the story, and I'm like, oh. So then I sent it to my editor, both of the ideas, and then she said, what about adding Runaway to the heiress? So that's what it's called. But it's not until next summer.
Well, I did not know this was Mary's book, because in Cliff's Edge, Mary disappears, and I'm like, looking for, I went through the synopses of the 3 books in the series, like, where's Mary's story? Where's Mary's story? So this is going to be fantastic. So is this romantic suspense also?
It is, because it has to be, because there's a mystery with Mary. Yeah. So so it is, but it ends happy ever after. But it's a fun one. I started off sort of using, a version, like you take somebody, but you make them young. So a version of somebody, and so I just used Jack Nicholson as kind of a kicking off place, but I don't put in but then of course I had to tone it way down, and I had to shift it. So now it's nothing like him, but I use that sort of like, to get me started.
Yeah, I've talked about that when I've done writing workshops, about starting with sort of an archetype, and it may be a character who doesn't have a lot of dimension to them, him or her, but it lets you as a writer start getting in the story, and then you start growing from that caricature. And don't tell your Jack Nicholson story, but it's on Cozy Tea Time with Meg Tilly. It's a good one, and it might involve a snake, but I'm not saying it.
but you know,
when you were a kid, it's and having a difficult childhood, did you were a reader as a child, right? Libraries and that kind of thing. What were the books that you were drawn to as a child? I always have to ask, this is one of my favorite topics.
Well, I loved All of a Kind Family with the 5 sisters, because we would, you know, when they went to the candy store and they had, you know, they each got their little bits and then they shared it and nibbled it slowly. I loved I really loved the Ellen Montgomery, but mostly the Emily of the New Moon ones. That's why my daughter was named Emily, because she had darkness, but there was also the beauty of nature. And we lived out in the country. We didn't have TV. My mom threw it out when I was little. I was like 3.5. And so we had no TV, and we lived out in the woods. So nature really filled me and helped provide solace when challenges happened. I would go there. So, and also in Emily of the New Moon, she sometimes gets the flash where she sees things.
I do not.
Oh, Emily of the New Moon series. So it's like Emily of the New Moon, Emily Rises, Emily. So, you know, everybody knows the Anne of Green Gables books. And of course I read all of those as well. But sometimes I get the flash, you know, where you have something that happens. So, that's the manuscript I'm writing now, is about that kind of thing. But so I guess that one, I love the Narnia books. I especially love The Magician's Nephew. I loved anything with magic. All the Oz books we read. I loved 7 Day Magic, Half Magic. I love Jane Austen. I read her multiple times when I was a teenager. I really liked the old books too, like Pollyanna I read, but Rose and Bloom.
Yeah.
You know, the old books, because that's what we had, fairy tales, a lot of fairy tales, because bad stuff happened in those old fairy tales, but it turned out well. That is so interesting. So you're done with Runaway Heiress. Have you done all your revisions on it? No. I'm in the middle of the revisions. So I was so excited because they really, really love the book. And I thought, oh, wow, so this is going to be a breeze. And I get them. But it's hard because I'm around 130 pages into new manuscript and having to pull. And I just got an idea, like, wait a minute, maybe I thought I was going to do this, but maybe, you know, so I was in the middle of and then I got the edits, and they're going to be due. So I had to drop it and try to re-enter that world. And it took me a little while to re-enter, but now I'm in it. And, you know, I think that edits, when I work with my editors, it always makes the book better. Like it always does, but it's hard to do sometimes because you're like, ooh, that one little comment means I've got to change this scene, and this scene, you know, or, you know how it
I just sent off my final revisions on my next book that I'm not talking about yet, but I know exactly what you mean. But for me, that is, I love those final revisions. I love that stage of a book because I have an outside brain telling me what was in my head but wasn't on the page.
Yeah.
And I also like, if there's difficulty I try to take like the hero and look at all the scenes he's in all through the book and make sure I've got a steady character arc. I like doing the same thing with the heroine. And I'm terrified of the blank screen. Every time I have starting a book, it's like, I can't do this again. I'm not really a writer. I suck, you know, all that kind of thing. And so when I start doing polishing, that is just my happy place. But it is hard when you're in another book and then you have to stop and go back, but maybe it gives you fresh eyes too.
Yeah, it does. I really do. I like it when you're like, oh, but sometimes I get like, how am I going to manage that? And then I have to do a bit and then go away. Like yesterday I worked for a while and then I was like, okay, this isn't, because I was trying to write something new that addressed a couple questions here. And then I went away and I knew I was forcing it. But then last night, you know, it's time, went to bed. And then I'm like, wait a minute. And I went back and I played with it when my conscious mind wasn't in the way. And then I was able to, and then easily I fixed the thing that took me like this much of a page and it had taken me 3 hours. And I was like, fix that, did some more, you know, and it was, so that was a
away sometimes is everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about Cozy Tea Time. This is your YouTube channel, and you do 2 videos a week. And you do these generally when you crawl out of bed, or, you know.
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, don't expect, I put on some makeup to you know, honor Susan Elizabeth Phillips. Normally my hair is not brushed and I might be in my pajamas, and I don't have any makeup on. And I'm not putting on pretty clothes because I knew if I had to get presentable, I wouldn't do it. And so I just thought, okay, I'll just do this and see. The first one's the worst, which is good because now I was wearing that shirt that I wore on the first Cozy Tea Time. I'd been wearing that for, maybe 2 days. and the only reason I had is because I'd wear it and then I'd be like, it's not so bad because I was writing. I was in a real writing jag. And then I would do it and then I would wash it and then I would put it back on again. I didn't realize just quite how bad it looked. It was
funny.
I mean, I knew I looked bad, but it was really bad. And I hadn't washed my hair.
It is real, it's honest, and it's extremely intimate when you do these. You feel like, well, you know, I get you, girlfriend, and have that real interchange. In one of the early ones, you talk about wearing your clothes inside out because you want everything to be cozy and you don't want the seams to bother you. And I've been having this awful itching lately. I actually went to dermatologist yesterday. And so last week I remembered that and I started wearing all my clothes inside out so I didn't itch so much.
Does it help? It helps, right?
It helps. It's very
and also you might have to change fabrics because as you know, that certain fabrics that I used to wear all the time, I can't wear. And also, here's another tip. So if you, I don't know if you wear flannel pajamas, whatever kind, but you know, sometimes how the fabric gets little bumps on it from washing.
Yeah.
You wear it inside out, turn it inside out. You can get more out of it because that part's not as been rubbing up against you and bumping.
What I learned from my friend. Really great. How did you get Sharon, by the way, Assistant Sharon is monitoring questions. So I'm going to take them in just a couple minutes. And Sharon will also post a link to Meg's YouTube channel. How did you get the idea for doing this?
Okay. My husband's to blame. He had mentioned it because we've been in quarantine. So because we're of a certain age and health conditions and blah, blah, blah. So we haven't gone out. Like we don't go out except for once every 2.5 weeks to get dairy stuff because we can't get that delivered. So, so we've just been in lockdown. Hence my hair was like short and cute. And now it's long. And I didn't realize how long it would take to dry it this morning. So he was, whoopsie, I just pulled my, he was in, he had been doing YouTube and he's decided to learn how to play guitar because he had played it as a teenager, but he didn't. So he was going to all these lessons and he loved it. So a couple of months prior to starting, because I've had it for around 2 months, maybe 2 months and a half, or 2 months and a week, he had said, you should do a YouTube channel. I'm like, oh, no way. So he'd say it every once in a while. But this one day, I had been writing my manuscript and I'd gotten 4.5 pages, which for me never happens. Like I hear about authors who, you know, write 10 pages a day or something. For me, I'm really happy to get 3 pages a day. I got 4.5. I felt like I could conquer the world. And I thought they were 4.5 fantastic pages. So we were doing our exercise inside because we, you know, have things. So I was on the treadmill and he was on the cross trainer and he started to talk about this YouTube thing again and how I really should do it. And I'm like, honey, I cannot, I don't want to have to put the makeup on. He goes, you don't have to. And I said, well, I don't want to like have to put outfits together. And he said, you don't have to. YouTube, nobody does. Here, look at this guy. And it's some guy like in his garage with his hair all like this. Okay, so I wasn't thinking clearly because he's had his hair like this and he's slugging back beer and there's all this, you know, junk behind him. And I was like, oh. So I thought, well, and also he was like all about it. And I thought, this is something we can do together. You know, I know this, okay, he might not, but kind of like entertainment for, you know, something to be like, oh, sure. You want a new toy train set? Here we go. You know, and I thought, I'll just do it. I said, okay. So I thought I'd call him on his bluff. So I said, let's go up and shoot one. So we went up, I did the thing. I sat down, I did it. And he's like, that's great. And I was like, he said, let's post it. And I'm like, oh man. But I thought, okay. So my hair was, you know, but we posted it. And then I thought, nobody's going to watch it. Thing will be over. But then people started watching, and then more people started watching, and more people. And, you know, like we have the subscribers, but there's a lot of lurkers as well. So it's pretty amazing. It's a whole bunch of countries.
I subscribed. I'm a subscriber, and I meant to look at your subscriber number before we started this to see how much of a boost we could give it. But now, hold on one second. So I'm looking at some of the questions that have come in, and oh my gosh, okay.
I subscribed to your one as well.
Yeah, well, mine's kind of lame compared to
yours isn't. You have all these fantastic interviews. You know what?
Sometimes I have my interviews posted.
After I finish writing some days, and if my husband's watching a hockey game, I put my cushions on my pillow and I boot up my computer, and then I feel like I'm visiting with you, and I get to watch these, and it's really good because you know what? You talk with amazing authors, and their advice or their writing process kind of shores you up, because you're like, oh, and I'm like, oh yeah, I could never do what Susan Mallory did. This last one, I tried the manuscript and I have a whole bunch of pages, but I'm way off. I'm not doing anything that was, you know, what I thought the whole outline was going to be. Right. My writing process is much more like yours. I think it's that acting background.
Yeah.
But yours is really good. I love watching I love watching your things.
Some of those, the writing interviews really are fun, talking to other writers. So here's what's happened. I like to keep these interviews to about 30 or 40 minutes in chunks, which is normally wonderful. But we have been absolutely, the questions that are coming in, there are a ton of them. So what I'm thinking is, can we do a part 2 of this sometime in the next few weeks or in the next month? Yeah. And then address those questions?
Yes.
Sounds good?
Yes, absolutely. That would be great.
Okay, Assistant Sharon, who is monitoring this. So let's write down all the questions we have coming in. Meg and I will schedule a part 2 to this interview because there's too much good stuff. And in the meantime, we'll post a link to Meg's YouTube channel for everybody to subscribe to. And I've got more questions too to add. We haven't talked about the lessons of the pandemic. We haven't talked about your cooking. We haven't talked about the amazing set of drawers behind you, which I want to talk about. So we'll email back and forth and figure out when to do another one. Okay.
Perfect.
You are the best. I hope everybody is reading your books for great romantic suspense. And Meg and I will be back again as soon as we can schedule it. Thanks, everybody. And thank you, Meg Tilly.
Thank you. Thanks.